here's the infamous case study. The idea is here that there's a business. This is the normal scenario. We've dropped off a few zeros, but a business has income of $250, has total expenses of $150, and of the $150 expenses, $100 would be eligible for R&D, an R&D claim. So without the R&D claim, the business makes a net profit of $100. Then when we come to the next slide, the first column is if there's no R&D claim. So the business has to pay 25%, which is $25. And then progressively going across, the final column is if the business is in a loss position. And you can see that the business, instead of paying $25, would get the business would then get a refund of $43.50. So add some zeros.
On their $100.
On their $100 off. So it's 43.5% of the $100.
And so, you see here that if they're tax payable, that what they get is an $18.50 tax benefit or a saving on their tax bill on 100, so 18.5%. And then where you've kind of got a small loss, you get somewhere between 18.5% and 43.5%. But this kind of arises where your tax loss is less than your R&D spend, basically. And then where you've got sufficient losses, get the full 43.5% refund. So it just shows the sort of range of outcomes you might get.
I think we'll leave it at that. I think we did a good job on that one. Not getting too complicated in that.
If you want to go through the rest of it, we'll be here all day.
And look, good. And as a reminder as well, because it's not a grant, it's a tax refund. Refunds are unaccessible. They do create some issues in terms of franking credits. We're going to get quite technical when you're paying out dividends, but it's not income. So you are getting $43,500, for example, on $100,000. That's yours. It's no tax payable on that. Just maybe briefly, we'll go through some of the activities.
Yeah, so we've been talking about making an R&D claim. So what we're making it on is eligible R&D activities. So money we spend on activities, there's two types. There's core R&D activities, which are experimental activities, and they're fundamental to the whole program. So we need to understand what these are. And once we've identified core activities, we can also claim our supporting R&D activities, which are directly related to core activities. So we've got to have a core activity to have anything. Then once we do, we can also claim support. So 3 key kind of criteria we need to meet for a core R&D activity. So firstly, the purpose of the activity should be to acquire new knowledge, and that typically is really around developing a new or improved product or process. So kind of that's key. So, at least some sort of incremental improvement over what's already out there. So that's the thing. We're doing something new or improved. Importantly, not new to the company. It's on either a sort of a reasonably accessible basis. So what's out in the public domain? So what can we find out about this subject? And if the answer isn't out there in the public domain and we seek this new answer or this improvement, then we'll qualify against this criteria. But just being new to us, that doesn't qualify. So it's new or improved. The second thing is that in seeking that improvement or that new knowledge, there needs to be some uncertainty about getting the technical outcome we're looking for. Okay, so there's an element of technical risk, technical uncertainty. So at the minimum, minimum level of technical uncertainty we can deal with is, as a competent professional in this area, I am confident we'll get the right outcome, but in practice, I need to work through a few different options to work out how we're going to get there. Anything less than that, we're not going to meet that technical uncertainty criteria. So routine problem solving, for example, won't qualify. So new or improved, technical uncertainty, and then the third thing is we need to address that technical uncertainty or that technical gap with a systematic progression of experimental activities. So some testing and trialling where we have an idea to solve our technical problem, and we run some tests to work out whether that idea works, observe the outcomes, draw some conclusions, maybe go back, tweak the solution or the idea to make it work better. And that's it. So if we've got those 3 criteria, we probably have a core R&D activity. So that's the key thing.
We're actually saying 1, 2, and 3, so it's an and.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every one of these has to be met. If you fall out of one, it's all over. You don't have an R&D claim. You can move on with your life.
And with the scientific, again, it's not like a lab coat type, process, right?
No. So a lot of the claims are around software. So And, you know, in that instance, it'll be about, can we deliver some significant new functionality in our software program? You know, create a new algorithm to perform some function, and then, you know, you run some tests of that algorithm. Doesn't quite work. You refine it, test again. That's a typical sort of one. And we do have lab coat stuff as well.
Well,
you know, we have life sciences, and medical, and pharma.
Yeah.
And then on the manufacturing side, you know, you'll often see you'll have process engineers and guys, mechanical engineers who are working with equipment to make their widgets, and they want to make that process better. You know, it probably won't be in a lab, it'll probably be in a dirty factory, but still it's technical and it's engineering based.
Yeah. My point is that it doesn't have to be a kind of the stereotypical
I haven't seen anyone in a lab coat for a while.
Okay. All right. So they're core R&D activities. There's also a notion of supporting R&D activities, which
don't need to meet any of those special criteria. They just need to be closely related to our core experimental work. So this could be like supporting design, talking to suppliers about, you know, what their equipment specifications are, whether, you know, you can build that into what you're building, all that kind of planning, kind of work. Now,
So are they part of that first three, or this is the second?
this is second. This is second. So once you've identified the first three, and they have to meet those criteria, you can also claim other activities that have no special character.
Sort of broadens the...
Yeah, it broadens it out to a much wider sort of thing. So, you know, you can imagine if you're doing an experiment on a prototype, for example, of widget. So, you know, you might hit it with a hammer and see if it breaks. That might be your experiment. The supporting work might be all the design that led to the creation of the prototype. So, you know, it's obviously a lot more expense caught up in actually doing the whole design process, for example. That's why these are important. There are some exclusions around what can be a core activity. They can be a support activity, but there's an additional test then. It has to be for the dominant purpose of supporting an experimental activity. And that's stuff like market research, research into humanities, social sciences. And one important thing where the dominant purpose test applies is around running trials where you're actually producing goods or services. So, you know, if you've got a factory and you're making widgets and you run a trial and then you go and sell the outputs into the market, it can qualify as a supporting activity, but only if the dominant purpose of running that trial was the experimental purpose, not the commercial purpose of selling widgets. Anyway, so that's support activity. So that's it really, in a nutshell. That's what we're looking for. One of those two categories of activity.
All right.
So once you've made the lodgements, right, so you've lodged a claim.
So you've lodged Oz Industry, yeah,
So-
and ATO, yeah.
Yeah, so say they've rejected it.
Yep.
Can you appeal it and redo it, or once
Yep.
it's rejected, it's done?
Yeah, so there's appeal processes during the review. So you've got a right of internal review. And then if you're dissatisfied with that, you can appeal to typically the AAT is your first port of call. And then, you know, you go to court, federal court, if you had the appetite to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, because it's a rather large program and I don't want to take up
Here's
too
a
much
case study
time.
where we can in exhausting detail go through what's
there's
a
a
core
case study
activity
we're not-
and a support activity.
we will not
But
be
you can
going
read this
through.
at your leisure.
Yeah, good. And there you go. We'll go through that's a case study. Some eligible expenditure. I think we can quickly go through that. Salary costs, consultants. You can.
Yeah, other ones are, overheads, travel. They're the main thing. Materials that you consume in your R&D as well.
Yeah. I think it'll be percentage of rand or overhead, percentage of rand. Yeah, salary. It's quite broad once you.
In a software, for most companies in New South Wales, it'll be a software claim where you're trying to develop some new software to assist. The main cost there will be software development contractors or in-house developers if you have your own in-house developers.
And there's some of the common claimants. So.
Yeah, I think we touched on that before, but yeah, software's the big one, then manufacturing, and then maybe agribusiness and food, sort of with our client base.
And as I said before, it's there's a lot of overlap with the following programs. So typically, if you're in one of these industries, you might qualify for these other grants that we're going to discuss.